excited. At the end of the symposium, we have the unveiling of 2 books, one from Agnieszka and one from Luke. So I think this is going to be a very wonderful day.
We're here. This is amazing. We're in Sigmund Freud's house, the house where he spent his last few years, and the house where he died also. And it's completely astonishing. You can go downstairs and see the sofa where he actually analysed people. You can also see the sofa next door on which he died, allegedly, but apparently it's true, so it's kind of completely amazing. So for those of us who are engaged with psychoanalysis, this really is like kind of visiting a shrine, and here we are talking about the unconscious and film, so this is a great privilege.
It's genuinely great to be with you this morning and to support this symposium. And I want to start by thanking Agnieszka for the invite to address you briefly this morning. I thought that at this time of day I might see another side to Agnieszka rather than her usual vim, vigour, vitality, but no such luck. Seriously, it's that energy and enthusiasm and of course academic rigour and expertise that has delivered this event with the support of our Media, Art and Performance Institute at the University of Bedfordshire and its organising committee, including Professors Gary Wannell and Professor Luke Hockley.
Well, today I've kind of moved on a little bit from that, but also backwards, because in talking about what Winnicott brings to the visual field, I found myself thinking about what has happened in the study of psychoanalysis and cinema over the past 30 years or so. And so there's a bit of my paper which looks back, and it is quite a theoretical paper. I know it's early in the morning. I feel like I should say sorry, but I can't do it here. Where can I do it?
It's an extract, a much reduced extract from the last 2 chapters of a book which I wrote with my co-author Joanna Davalis, who's a Californian psychotherapist and is right now undoubtedly waking up to do a whole day's work psychotherapy, and she can't be here. So Joanna must have credit for this as well. I'll explain the title as we go along, but it's from the Bomazzo Garden in Italy, and you'll see the title on the screen if it all works as well as it did a moment ago.
So my paper is about the French director Catherine Breillat, notorious for extremely explicit films, and indeed I'm going to show you a very explicit clip, but far later in the paper. There's a lot of theory and discussion before we get there.
So I'm going to talk a bit about Jung's idea of the image and what image is for Jung. And then I'm going to sort of think a little bit about some of the ways in which my clients talk about filmic experiences as part of their therapy sessions, and to notice how different that is to the way in which academic film theory has typically used psychoanalytic language.
Psychoanalysis and documentary hasn't actually been used. They've been used very sparingly and fairly recently. And the reason for it is in part that there's a kind of issue what documentary actually is. But fundamentally, I'm looking at documentaries which deal with testimony, trauma, and which rely very heavily on interview and an encounter between the filmmaker and the person who has to give an account of themselves to the filmmaker. So I say documentary like that is always a dialogue, a conversation with the other, and it is complicated. And my key kind of move is to say, which is controversial, which is that mechanisms which take place in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, and in particular, but not exclusively, transference, will also take place in a documentary encounter of that kind.
In this gathering, I hardly need to say that there's a complex relationship between gaze and voice, both in psychoanalysis and in cinema. But perhaps it's slightly more controversial to assert that the former, gaze, has always won out over the latter, voice, in both domains. Even for Lacan this might be true, despite his assertion of the centrality of gaze and voice as objects.
I'm astonished by this book. It is so rich. It brings in so much that we needed in this field of linking the experience of viewers to films and linking the experience of clients in therapy, and it seems to me to have come exactly at the right time. It's tying together all kinds of knots: ritual, the cinema-going experience, business, the awful nature of being Christopher Vogler, and the great nature of being people who can free their minds of preconception and work on this. This is a really very special book indeed.
Agnieszka and I talked a lot about the question of whether transference, which is something that happens in the clinic, also happens outside it. And we have different views on this. And she had different views from her examiners. But she basically said to them, "This is my review and I'm right." And they said, "Okay, pass, no, we can't get, pass, no corrections." We accept it. In fact, she took on, in her claim that transference, which is something that happens in the clinic, also applies outside, she took on one of the primary, as her examiner, Ian Parker, one of the people who's written most about how specific transference is to the clinical situation, how it doesn't apply at all outside. And I don't know if she persuaded him, but she certainly got round him. It's a kind of profoundly interesting book about what it means to be a person who makes things possible for people, other people who want to express themselves. And of course the complexity of that. You know, how people's fantasies about what's going to happen when they're on film, how they're going to come about, how people think that they're going to represent themselves somehow truthfully, at the same time everybody's going to believe them. So I really recommend it. It's a great read as well. It's very funny in parts. It's disturbing and it's really compulsive.